And my accident is it's no dramatic story. I was just on a motorbike and a guy ran a red light and I went underneath his car and got dragged down the road for a bit. So I broke my spine at the neck, the thoracic and the lower lumbar. So it just got eviscerated and
Hey everyone, welcome to The Rose Show. This week we have one of the best disabled surfers in the world, or ParaSurfers as they're now called, Spike Kane. He is here to tell us about the new Olympic sport of parasurfing. It used to be called adaptive surfing, but since they're now going through the Olympic process, they're changing their name. Spike will tell us about how he became paralyzed, how he felt about it during and after, and how he is still able to live a great fulfilling life despite the life-changing accident. We also discuss millennial mentalities with dangerous sports, and Spike walks us through how parasurfing was developed. If you're looking for an inspirational story with some fun twists and turns along the way, this episode is for you. Okay everyone, let's go. Hey, Spike, thanks for coming on the show. How are you?
Greg, I'm very well, thank you.
You have definitely quite a story, that's for sure. Can you give us a little bit of an insider perspective? You know, I obviously had an accident, maybe with a motorcycle or something, and then life changed. How did that all go?
Yeah, and it was just 15 years ago last week. So I just celebrated that.
Belated anniversary? Do you celebrate that stuff?
What is it called? A lot of people call it their alive day, right? So you survived the trauma of a life-threatening injury, and you carried on. So from that point on, your entire life changes, and which is what happened for me on May the 11th at 6:20 p.m. in Seattle. And my accident is it's no dramatic story. I was just on a motorbike, and a guy ran a red light. And I went underneath his car and got dragged down the road for a bit. So I broke my spine at the neck, the thoracic and the lower lumbar. So it just got eviscerated. And so my injuries were really bad. And I ended up in a hospital for 6 months. But leading up to that accident, I was always a very active outdoor, what I would call recreational sport. So whitewater kayaking, mountaineering, all of the things that encompass a healthy outdoor life. And surfing was one of them. So part of my path had always been working in institutions like kids camps, water sports centers, and teaching and training. So I'd worked with disabled people before I was injured. So I actually knew about, at that time was called adaptive surfing. So my pathway into it started before I was injured.
Well, that's pretty cool. So you've already were in that world a little bit, and which actually might be a godsend depending on how you look at it. But
absolutely.
Yeah, and so it was an easy transition for you. It wasn't like your whole life stopped. You just were now on the other side of the fence. Could I say that? And now you're one of the people you work with?
Yeah, the summer before I was injured, I was with all my friends on the Oregon coast surfing. It was a big holiday weekend, and we were there for probably 4th of July. So we were spending a few days at a friend's house down there. And someone showed up with a friend of theirs who'd been in a bad car accident and couldn't stand up unsupported. So we took him out surfing because I knew about the whole process, and we got out. And my experience with him is it's kind of like a very euphoric, just as an able-bodied person going into the water and helping somebody to get involved in a sport that you're passionate about, and that brings them euphoria as well. that moment was kind of life changing. So when I got injured, I was like, oh, well, I'm fine. I've got that still. And I know that I can still go sailing. I know that I can still get on rivers. I can do all of this. I can continue to live the lifestyle that I had in a modified way, but not lose it completely.
That's very interesting. Going back to the actual accident, was it just a clean snap, or did it just degrade over time? Did you feel it, or was it already over and maybe thank God, did you feel anything?
I didn't feel anything. In fact, I also I hit my head so hard. I had a helmet on, but luckily the helmet saved my life because the impact was so severe. I got a traumatic brain injury, which took away all my memory. I actually lost my memory from a few days before the accident to about 11 days after the accident. So that's just a blank space of time for me. But my spinal cord was severed around the T2, T1 level. And then I've got an impingement at C5. So I have some, like, this hand's a bit goofy. So I have some issues on my right hand, but I've got good solid grip. My injury level is from armpit to armpit. So everything below that, there's no muscle at all. There's no core strength. So everything that I do is just with my arms. And luckily I've got decent dexterity in my hands. So I can, I can operate completely independently.
That is very interesting. So after the accident and you got out of the hospital and all that sort of stuff, how long was it before you were thinking about getting onto a surfboard already? Was it like, oh, I got to get going now? Or was there a bit of like a kind of like a reality check before you started thinking a bit more positive? Or was it just move on right away?
It was immediate.
So I
was out of the hospital in the October, and as soon as the ski areas opened up in November, I was back out skiing and out surfing as well. So I just took the surfboard that I had before I was injured. Because I knew the sport, I just strapped some pads to it to help lift my chest off the board itself so my face isn't in the water. And then me and my surfing buddies, we went out to the coast and got in the ocean and got back at it right away.
That is really cool. Did the doctors get upset about that?
Doctors, no, not at all. They kind of encouraged it, and they knew, because I spent so much time in hospital, they got to know me and my history. So they encouraged. There's recreational programs that you can get. There's actually, in the hospital in Seattle, they have a recreational therapist on staff in the spinal unit. So she would get you into the pool. So a lot of it is therapeutic recreation. So it's getting into a pool, swimming, because your body's supported by the water. So that's what's great about surfing, is that you're out of a wheelchair. You're not in the environment that you're in all day long. And it's the sense of freedom that you get from it it's therapeutic for anybody. So if you're just a normal surfer and you run out into the ocean and you get a few waves, you come back, and that's just sets your mind for the day. You just, it's a great readjustment mentally. And then you add any kind of disability or stress or anxiety disorder, whatever you've got, into that mix, and you take people out surfing, I guarantee you, and it's been proven clinically, that it's a beneficial, your body and your mind will have a beneficial response to it.
Is that because you're distracting yourself from whatever issue that you're leaving at home and you're forcing yourself to kind of just focus on something else?
No, I think it's actually, it's something deeper. It's either it's chemical or whatever it is. They're still studying it. I have a friend who works for the VA down in San Diego, and she has been instrumental in the study of it and getting it to the point where it's recognized as so the medical benefits of it are recognized to the point of where she can now write a prescription for surfing for vets who are coming back with either PTSD or any other anxiety disorder. So it's clinically recognized now.
Huh. That is really, really cool. So how long were you in the hospital before you got out, though? How long did you do the training in the pools and everything?
6 months.
6 months.
So I was so badly injured that I couldn't do anything for myself. I couldn't feed myself, brush my teeth, couldn't do any of that. So I had to have full-time care for about 3 months. And then I could start very slow recreation therapy and just physical therapy. So building my dexterity up with my hands and learning how to use a fork again. So because then my grip was terrible. So you have to modify cutlery, and it's a whole process. The most fascinating thing about the whole experience is that you, just as a person who's worked in that world, you think you already know about disability and the challenges that it presents, but you realize if it happens to you that you don't know anything. And spinal cord injury it's an anomaly within the disabled community, because every single spinal cord injury is different. So someone could have the spinal cord injured at the exact same level as me and still be able to walk, or have core muscles or all kinds. So it's a
mixed bag. You never know exactly what's going to happen because we don't have enough physiology under our scientific lens to really pinpoint any kind of solutions for this stuff like that.
Right. Yeah.
It's interesting. So, but when you were in the hospital and you were finally, like you said, you realizing actually what it's about, what was going through your head? Because you had already training with it, but like you said, it's different. So what was different, or what did you not expect to find that you did find that you didn't really learn through the theoretical side of it?
The first thing I learned, which was the best, was so out of the hospital. I'm only out of the hospital like 6 weeks when we go out to the coast, because my body is all different now. So it doesn't regulate its temperature. And the Washington coast is very cold, the water. Even in the middle of summer, you have to be in a wetsuit. So the first thing I learned was how quickly I get cold, to the point of like hypothermia. And then the second thing I learned was that I sink like a stone. So as soon as I came off my board the first time, I just went straight to the bottom. And, my friends just came and fished me out, get me back to the surface. And I'm like, what was that? I'm like physically just not buoyant anymore. And so after the first day, the takeaway from that session was, I'm going to need a life jacket.
That's pretty funny in a sense. Yeah, that's you never really think about it, because you're when you swim, you're so used to using the muscles and the different propulsion techniques and stuff. You don't realize that if you're literally just dead weight, what happens, and that's something people don't talk about.
Yeah, I literally just went straight to the bottom. I was like, I'm trying to swim with my arms, but it's not enough. I was so weak at that time as well.
Yeah, exactly. What did it feel like when you had to do all your hand exercises? Did it feel like you just couldn't move them, or was it just like you were moving a really heavy weight, or was it painful when you're moving your hands for the first time? What was going on through your head there?
Man, it's hard to actually remember. It seems so long ago now. I did, the exercises that I had to do were a combination of hand-eye coordination, and brain exercises because of the brain injury. I had to work with a speech therapist to be able to, exercise the brain muscle so that it responded, back to kind of how it used to.
Wow. Okay.
That was something that it took me a while to get my head around, because I didn't feel mentally altered at all, but there were issues like how my brain was now working. So
what kind of issues? Like, was it just hard to talk, or just you're saying things that you thought you weren't saying, or?
No, it was, I could speak fine. A speech therapist in the hospital, speech therapy covers the whole spectrum of traumatic brain injury. So it's not like an elocution lesson where you learn to talk again. It actually is the therapy, and is a lot of it is, because you've seen stroke victims where their speech is impaired. I think that's where it starts, but then they have to learn to, coordinate any affected muscle. And so a lot of it was with that.
Okay. That's very interesting. And so what was going through your brain though during these 6 months? Were you basically in depression trying to just fight through? Were you already just thinking about getting onto a surfboard and what life would be like after, and had already moved on? Or, what was the day-to-day grind in your mind?
Okay, I was essentially supine for so long. I'm just laying in bed, staring at the ceiling a lot. I've got the family coming in all the time. I was the whole 6 months, there was always somebody, either a friend or a family member, that was in the room with me, that was actually physically there. So if I needed anything, just because there's, it's a lot of those facilities, the staff aren't there, they're not at your beck and call. So if anything went wrong, someone was there to help, just intervene or get people. So I was always talking with people the entire time, and the conversation was always about getting back out there and doing, I was a very avid snowboarder, whitewater kayaker, and surfer, and it was always about that, and sailor as well. So it was always about that. So I'm just imagining what my life is going to be like and preparing for it. So I'm saying to my friends, like, what do we have to do to the boat to modify it to get out sailing? And these are all things I had no idea about, what modifications to equipment needed to happen. So
that is cool. So you were already mentally at the next thing. You weren't there just kind of wallowing in self-pity. You had someone there that would always kind of distract you from, I'm sure, what could be very deep thoughts, but basically kept you on the move forward, and that's how you got out of it.
Yeah, the big thing for me that I still don't understand is I never went into any kind of dark place. I never got depressed about it. My acceptance of what had happened to me was absolutely instant. I was just like, all right, this is where I'm at now, just move forward. And I think I've always had that attitude anyway. And having worked in that community prior to the accident, it gave me all the tools to just keep on going. And so sitting in hospital, staring at the ceiling and having these conversations was just preparation for getting out of hospital and going and doing those things.
That's very cool. It's that you're a strong-minded person. So based on the people you've talked to that are in somewhat similar situations, are you one anomaly? Did other people get depressed, or is that kind of normal that, you know, your brain just switches and says, okay, well, that's done, so let's just do something else, and it's more of a survival technique just to keep moving forward, or is there something different about how you perceive the whole situation?
No, I think I was a bit of an anomaly just because of my history. Also, I was a lot older. I was in my 40s when I got injured. So I'd already lived a very full and active life. A lot of people that I've met since then are younger. People are getting injured younger because the sports that we do now have a lot more risk. You know, like just look at parkour, for instance. That is amazing. We, as humans, have evolved. We have physically evolved. We're capable of doing things with our bodies now that we weren't 30 years ago. And you probably see that all the time in trampolining.
Yeah,
The gymnastic element of what we are as a human has definitely evolved.
It's gymnastics and trampoline definitely have high risk for stuff like this, and this is why it's so interesting to hear it from your perspective, obviously. And you know, the gymnastics community and parkour, and all, not so much parkour because they tend to not focus so much on it, because there's actually not as many major issues like that people realize. They look at something that's like, oh my god, guy jumping from roof to roof, but a lot of the times the training is a little bit more low key, more chilled out, hang out, you know, stuff like that. And so it's the extremes that people will go to, and that's where a lot of people get really skittish. But I don't see how you're going to stop the new generation, because for them, that new progress, that yes, there's obviously risks involved, but that progress is more worth it to them than the risks at the end of the day.
Well, that's where I was going with it, is that because of the evolution of what we do, people are getting injured younger because you know, that's the age span of people who are much more involved in high risk activity. So before they've started families and all that, once people start a family, they're a lot more cautious. And so because I was a lot older when I got injured, I think I had the mental tools to deal with it more than a lot of the younger generation. So people who are getting injured in their 20s, their teens, even their early 30s, I think they have a much more difficult time just doing a mental adjustment to a new way of living. And there's so much that comes with a spinal cord injury. You know, your body doesn't operate the same. You know, you've got to spend it steals you of time, right? It takes time away from you because you've got so much to do during the day just to function.
Right. It's all the organs that you don't really realize how much you depend on them. And now you got to, in some ways, manually stimulate those organs in one way or another. And all of a sudden, there goes many hours of the day gone, and you're exhausted afterwards, to the point where then it's hard to then get up and decide to go and do something as well.
Yeah. And I think for the younger generation coming into it, and once they realize that, then it's very easy to slip into a dark place and wallow, you know, and just think, oh no, it's too hard, or I have to rely on other people to do all these things. And that, you know, taking away your autonomy is a big issue for people dealing with an already traumatic experience.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely tough. But so then you basically already had the tools to go. You decided, you know what, I'm already moving on. I'm already daydreaming about getting out on the ocean or the lakes or rivers or wherever. And you decided that you're going to now take up parasurfing. So what is parasurfing? How long has it been around? How did that develop?
Okay. Parasurfing. So I'm going to refer to it as adaptive surfing.
Okay.
Right. Adaptive surfing has been around for decades. And people who've been in similar situations to me have just figured out how to get back in the ocean. But the modern day movement started in the 90s. He's a friend of mine now. And this is the guy that I knew about before I was injured. And his name's Jesse BILLAUER. And he was a up-and-coming surfer in the Malibu area in California. He was about to go pro, and he broke his neck at Zuma Beach in Malibu and became quadriplegic. But because he was about to go pro, he had all these connections in the surfing industry. And after a couple of years, I think, he was only a teenager when he got injured as well. So after a few years, he got back out in the ocean with one of my favorite surfers of all time, Rob Machado. And he was friends with Rob. And Rob and his boys got Jesse back out in the ocean, not really knowing how it was going to go, because quadriplegic, Jesse's disability is very high level. He's from the neck down. So they fitted a board where he could just support himself on his elbows and pushed him into waves. And he's a fantastic surfer, Jesse. And he just nailed it. And then they just kept on improving the boards and his equipment, and the guys in the water figuring out, the dynamics of helping him. And then there's almost everybody's heard of the movie Endless Summer.
Oh yeah, yep.
So it's this classic 60s surf movie, and that was made by a director named Dana Brown. And his son, Dana, is also a filmmaker. And he made a movie about surfing called Step Into Liquid. And it featured Jesse in it. So this predates social media. And so Jesse's story goes global because it's getting shown in the theaters. And I went to see that movie before I was injured. And that's how I got it. That's how I knew about adaptive surfing. And because of that, little satellite organizations started figuring out how to get their communities into the ocean to surf, because because of the therapeutic effects of it, for one, but also they were inspired by this story. So Jesse also set up a foundation called Life Rolls On, where they got people of all disabilities into the ocean to surf. And that is ground zero, as far as I'm concerned. That's kind of ground zero for the entire modern day adaptive surf movement. And since then, it's gone on to, there's now a world championship. So that's happened the last 5 years. And there's a push to get it into the Paralympics. And when it goes into the Paralympics, that's when it becomes parasurfing. So the name of it has only recently changed to parasurfing because it's now on the pathway into the Olympics.
That is crazy story. That's a heartwarming story, actually, really, because it's not just some capitalistic guy saying, "Hey, I can reformat some sport and make $1 billion." It's actually a sport grown out of necessity of trying to help people deal with life, from a actual disabled perspective, but also, just like you said, a clinical regular perspective for us regular folk that can still get all the great adaptations from being out in the waves and doing all that sort of stuff. So that is actually really, really cool.
Yeah, and so Jesse BILLAUER's just his drive to start the Life Rolls On, that exploded globally because people in Hawaii set up Access Surf, set up a organization. So that's a charity that gets the local community and visitors as well out in Hawaii. And who doesn't want to go and surf in Hawaii, right?
Exactly.
But then it was Access Surf who started holding competitions. So every year they'd have a competition for the adaptive surfers. And they're the ones who figured it out. They figured out, like, okay, your disability is different than your disability. So it's not fair for you two to compete against each other. So then they started coming up with divisions. So there's like, and that has evolved over the last 15 years, and to the point of it's getting to an Olympic format now.
So that's how they do their categories. It's not about skill level. It's more about what's your disability level, and then you get put into a category with other similar people.
And how you surf. So for me, I surf in a prone position, and a lot of people who are missing a limb might kneel or stand or squat. Some people just can surf with a prosthetic, can surf like anybody else. And pretty much everybody's seen Bethany Hamilton, who's missing an arm. She got bit by a shark in Hawaii, so she's missing the entire arm from the shoulder. And she surfs on the professional circuit. She doesn't surf on the adaptive circuit. She's out there, competing against everybody else.
Now that's interesting. Is that good or bad? Is that like a slight to the disabled community, or is that just her being strong enough and actually saying, we're not disabled, we are completely abled and it's fine? Is that good or bad?
I think it's good and bad. I think it's really good for her. And she does support the adaptive community, especially the young women and the girls that are involved. And she comes out with them. They do the Supergirl Pro at Oceanside every year, and she's there. And she's a great inspiration to a lot of young women mainly, but to a lot of people. This story's great. It's incredible. But she's never been involved in the competitive side of adaptive surfing or the growth of the sport. She's not involved in any of the inner workings. Like the International Surfing Association is the global governing body for surfing, and they are very active in growing the adaptive sport. So is Access Surf, so is Life Rolls On. There's other organizations like Stoke for Life in California. Stoke for Life holds the US Nationals for adaptive surfing. Actually, they call it the US Open. So anyone from any part of the world can come and compete. And it has a very significant purse for the first place prizes. And if you make the podium, you're going to get paid. So it's one of the...
How much would you get?
It started off at like 1,000, and they try and get it up every year. And I don't know where it's at now. But it's worth your time,
That's it. How big is this community?
So we just had the World Championships in March, probably the last major international competition in the country before the whole COVID shutdown. So it finished on March 14th, and I believe there was over 150 competitors.
Okay. From
like 30 nations.
Okay.
I don't even know. I'd have to go on the site and look it up. But okay. The whole event, there was several hundred people involved. So it was
so like 150 competitors, and then how does the competition actually go? How do you structure the competition?
It's similar to any other big surfing event, like the US Open or the WSL. There's a physical structure on the beach with a tower, which the judges are all in, and the infrastructure of the competition is all based inside that tent. So there's kind of like a little village on the beach, areas for the athletes, and food stations, sponsors, and then the operations tent, because it's streamed as well. It's streamed live over over the web.
Is there TV coverage?
Is there what?
Is there TV coverage?
Yeah, yeah, there is in those events. And then so it's because it's on the it's on the pathway to Olympics, and the ISA has always presented the sport as if it's already in the Olympics. So that's the way they operate, and they've finally got surfing in the Olympics now. So Tokyo this year was supposed to be the first time that surfing was a sport on an Olympic level.
Oh wow, that's too bad given the circumstance, but still really cool.
Right. So the ISA is moving with adaptive surfing in the same direction. So now it's parasurfing, and at the beginning of the event, there's a parade of nations. So everyone, each team is in a line, and we go through it's in La Jolla in California. So we do the ceremony, and it's the opening of the games or the competition, and then so that day is kind of a celebratory day, and then when competition starts, it's game on, and it's just organized like any other multi-division event.
So you got your categories, male, female?
Yeah.
And then different types of disabilities. And is it just, again, kind of like normal surfing, judging how well you can ride the waves, how long you can ride the waves, how big the waves, and just giving you an overall score?
Yeah, so there's normally like 4 surfers in the water. You're obviously trying to get the highest points. There's rules that apply. You can't cut somebody off or drop in on them. So you'll get penalized if that happens. The judges are looking for the criteria that they're trying to judge on is speed, power, and flow is their criteria. But as a competitive surfer out there, you're always looking for the best wave, the best position to take off, the longest ride, the more dynamic maneuvers that you can do in the wave at the critical sections. So it's strategic. There's a lot goes into it on the competitive level. And so I actually competed against Jesse. Jesse won the world title. Jesse BILLAUER, who I was talking about earlier. And because he's a phenomenal surfer, but his water crew, the guys that help him get in the wave, they're all very, very technical and experienced surfers themselves. They use all of their knowledge and bring that to the table. So it's to be in the water with those guys is just, first of all, it's an honor. But I always learn so much because they're never off. They don't go out there and have a bad session. They go out there and they make the most of everything that's presented to them. Whatever the ocean serves up, they'll take it and they'll make it work for them.
That is really, really cool. So it almost sounds like more like a team sport compared to traditional surfing, where it's obviously more one-on-one kind of thing. So is that more of a team dynamic once you get into parasurfing?
In those divisions, so that division is called the assist division. And when you've a higher level injury, it's just physically not viable to swim out yourself to the lineup. You need help. So in that division, that's the only division where you can get assistance in the water. Okay. So your swimmers help get you out to the lineup. And then once they push you on the wave, you're on your own. And then the next division up from that is prone unassisted, where people can swim themselves out into the waves. And that's another great division because those surfers are amazing. All adaptive surfers are amazing, but those 2 divisions are my, ones that I really pay attention to.
The more exciting.
Yeah, I learn the most from them. And that's kind of like my division as well. So then there's a sit down division where people surf in seated and they either paddle onto the wave with their hands or they use a paddle. And that's a whole different element. And then there's a kneel division, there's an upper limb division and a lower limb division. And they all compete against each other. Oh, there's also blind as well, visually impaired.
Blind? How do you surf blind? How do you know where the wave is?
You have a coach in the water that talks you through it. So especially when a competition, a coach, your water coach for the visually impaired, is telling you how long's left on the clock, where the other surfers are, what the waves are, telling you where to be in position, and then they just talk you onto the wave. And some people are the completely blind people who've been doing it for a long time just have an extra sense. They've figured it out. And they are phenomenal. I was in Costa Rica at a competition a couple of years ago, and the blind surfer down there, he's 100% blind. And he put a challenge out to some of the professional surfers in Costa Rica to come and surf against him. And they wore blackout goggles. And it was one of the best competitions I've ever seen. It was so good. And when they all came, so they had to come into the competition. And as soon as they arrived on site, the glasses went on them. So they had to go through the whole process. They had to go and register, visually impaired. They had to find their coach, get their equipment down to the beach, paddle out and compete against the other 4 professional surfers. And it was fantastic to watch.
Wow, that's really cool. That's sounds more like a holistic sport that doesn't really just live in the water. It's the whole thing, and just getting from the house to the competition and back home again, everything. It's almost like that's all part of it as well. And you just don't think about it.
Oh yeah, it's massive. It's a massive part.
That is very interesting. And so when you're actually going, how do you turn? How do you maneuver the board? Can you use your arms in that way, or how does it work for you?
So I've got a handle attached to the front of my board, and I've got a pad for the chest. So, a lot of the surfers just keep their elbows on the board and don't put their arms in the water, and they don't have a pad there, so they hold themselves up. So because I've got the pad, I can rest my chest on the pad and holding onto the handle, and I can drag an arm in the water to help turn. But it's mostly the board. It's like a ski, essentially. You lean on an edge and you'll get a carve. It's just like you would in snow. It's the same thing on the water. So you use that edge and you just transfer your weight from side to side and back and forth if you can. But the board's got to be modified in the right way.
How is it modified?
So it's got the handle, the chest strap, and at the back, I have two upright protrusions that help keep my legs on the board, because otherwise they'll just wash off.
Right, yeah, because you don't really have control. It's not like you can try to actively bounce. So it's almost like you got to tie your legs down.
Yeah, so I actually do tie my legs together, and then the modification at the back of the board near the tail is actually just fin boxes that, underneath the board is the fins. Well, we've taken them and put them on the top, and then we put padded out fins on the top. So it kind of looks like the wings of an old Cadillac. And that's where your feet go in. So when you get on the water, whoever's helping me will lift my legs over those and put them in the slot. And then and that's it. I'm in position then. So my body will stay more or less on the center line of the board.
But now, how do you get out to the wave? Do they push you out and they start you on top of the wave kind of thing? Or do you have to do that all yourself?
I can paddle out if there's no waves. So a lot of the breaks are, nearly all of the breaks in California are beach breaks. So there's no easy path out. You know, you try and find a rip, but you're always having to paddle out through waves. And I can't, you know, when the waves get to a certain height, I just can't paddle through them. So I typically get assistance out, and then, you know, sometimes I can paddle onto the wave, sometimes I can't. So if there's somebody there to give me a little push, then I can, you know, catch a lot more waves.
That is cool.
But if it's a point break, then there's a clean path to paddle back. So I can normally be self-sufficient in that situation.
Okay.
But it's still hard.
Have you ever had a situation where it's gone really wrong and you like flipped over by accident and all that?
Oh yeah, I've had many of those. I think everybody who's even a surfer has had a bad experience out there at some point.
Can you tell us one of the bad experiences and how you dealt with it?
Yeah, so the prone surfing is one way that I surf, but because of all of my background with kayaking, I can do this sit down with a board called a wave ski, and it's similar to a kayak, but it's a surfboard shape. And because of my level of injury, I had a backrest made and a strap in at the chest, so that supports me. And now I can use the paddle, but I don't have much, you know. I can't move my weight around a lot. So I flip over on that quite a lot. And I have a quick release system to get out. And we were surfing up in Malibu. Oh no, it was Rincon. It was up in Rincon in California. And it's a beautiful point break, very clean wave. And I took this long ride in and flipped over at the end of it. And my belt got stuck and I couldn't get it off. So I was upside down and stuck upside down in the water. And I kept on trying to get the thing off. And I couldn't. And I managed to get my face to the surface of the water, get a gulp of air, went down again. And then, I don't know, it's probably a minute's past now. And a minute's a long time. And I'm like, oh, I'm really stuck. I can't get out of this. So I scrambled to get my face up by the water again and just break the surface and managed to make a noise. And people are always watching. And eventually somebody came over and got me, and they just flipped the whole thing the right way up. But I was still stuck, trapped in, and we figured out what had gone wrong with the belt, and I just scrapped that whole system and started again.
That must have been pretty scary. What was wrong with the belt? What happened? Did it just get stuck on something like a rock or something?
I wiped out pretty hard and it twisted. And the buckle, the quick release buckle, it got seized within its own webbing. So I couldn't, it just wouldn't come off, wouldn't release.
Oh man, that's gotta be scary. What was going through your head when you were underwater?
I hope someone's around to come and get me. I knew that people would be watching. I was just like, all right.
Come on, guys, let's go. Get off your boats.
But the thing is, you've got that panic, emotion comes in, and you're just like, okay, you've got to suppress that panic because it's not going to do you any good, and it's just going to, you're not going to get out. So I had to just sit there and hold on.
Jeez.
So that was like, that's a frightening moment. But a couple of years ago, for 18 months, I just had bad luck. So I broke my femur in Hawaii one year, not actually surfing, but it was for it was right before the competition, and because I have absolutely no sensation, I just strapped my legs together, put a brace on, and competed with a broken femur, which is not smart. But I was like, I traveled all the way to Hawaii. It's one of my favorite breaks, and on Queens, and the conditions were great, and I'm a competitor, and I need to be out there competing. So I just strapped them together, and everyone's like, "You're mad!" There's all kinds of issues that you could have, but all I did was just surfed in my heats, and I took third place. And that's people from all over the world coming to compete. So that was awesome. And then, so that healed up. And about 6 months later, I was out surfing, wiped out, broke my left femur. So then I'm out of the water, recovering from that. And I got the green light from the doctor in the beginning of the December. And we had a competition, the World Championships was coming up. So the femur heals, I get the green light on the Thursday, and I go and do a competition on the Saturday, and then I break my tibia.
Oh man, you are just not having luck, are you?
No, so yeah. I break a lot of things.
Well, is it because of surfing, or is it because you can't feel it? So it just naturally, you're more prone to sort of forget about it and be more quote unquote reckless with the lower body.
Yeah, it's just the conditions. If I'll go out in the conditions that are not favorable, so the energy that's in the ocean is pretty powerful, and because I've got no control, when I wipe out, my body's just getting dragged around. It's like a rag doll. So because there's no muscle to tense up, it just it'll just snap, and your bones become more brittle when you have a spinal cord injury over time, just because they're not doing what they would do in a normal body.
Right. So for you, it's just when you have an injury, it's worse because where someone like me would be able to put my hands down to stop something or tuck my leg in to be able to stop from smashing off a rock or something, you can't do that. You're basically, once it's over, you're just going for the ride and hoping that it's nothing major.
Yeah. I'm just trying to stay afloat most of the time.
That is crazy. That is crazy. Then you mentioned that you travel a lot, obviously. Do you have any special traveling provisions?
No, not really.
So do you just go into at the check-in counter before you get on the flight, just in your wheelchair, and they just give you your special spot on the plane, and it's just simple as that?
Yeah, so normally I've figured it out over the years, traveling with a surfboard and all your gear. I can get myself to the airport, and I nearly always travel alone. So, I use Uber. I use an Uber X to get to the airport because they can get the surfboard in the Uber X. The guys, whoever the Uber X driver is, normally is like, yeah, I'll take your stuff inside. So once the stuff's inside the airport, I just check it in, and then I don't have to deal with it until the other end. And there's always porters at the airports that will help out. So if I can get the boards from curbside to check-in, then I'm golden. And
what
traveling. Sorry.
What about security? Do you have any special deal with security?
I always show up at minimum an hour earlier than the 2 hours. So I always show up about 3 hours before the flight because everything takes a lot longer. So going through TSA, they have to go through the wheelchair and all that, and do the full body pat down. So yeah, it just takes longer.
Is it just like everybody else, or do they take you to a special room where they can do a little bit more privately?
They're obligated to ask if you want a private screening, but it just takes more time. So I just do it right there.
Do you get any weird looks at the airport with your wheelchair, but then a surfboard, and people are going like, "What the heck, man? How does this work?"
You'd be surprised at how many people are kind of savvy to it. And I've been at airports where people have come up to me and gone like, "Hey, do you know so and so?" Because they know someone who surfs who's in a wheelchair, and chances are I probably do. So it happened in Costa Rica. This couple come up to me and like, "Hey, are you going to Jaco? Do you know Juan and do you know Zach and these guys?" So yeah, most times, but people do occasionally look and go like, what's in the bag kind of thing, and it's like, obviously it's a surfboard. It's like, why have you got that surfboard? That's really what the question is. It's not like what's in the bag. It's like, why are you with this thing?
Yeah. So, yeah, that's crazy. I think it's really cool how you've been able to really just turn that around and, keep going. And what ranking are you in the world stage, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm ranked number 5th in the world right now.
Very cool. Very cool.
For the ISA.
So does that mean that you have a chance to go to the Olympics if they get everything all crossed off?
Yeah, if it happened very soon, yeah, I could, because I'd be the top ranked prone surfer in my nation. So I still surf for England.
So are you number 1 in England?
I guess I'm probably, I don't know.
How do you not know?
So the way that it's divided in the UK is there's England, Wales, Scotland, Channel Islands, and Northern Ireland. And they're all separate surfing entities. Whereas if it goes to the Olympics, it's got to be Great Britain. So it's got to be the combination of all of those nations.
So everyone competes for a slightly different association, but the IOC is going to come in and basically force them all to sort of somehow come together under one governing body.
Yeah. So in the surfing world right now, Hawaii is a separate nation than the USA. So on the World Surfing League, the Hawaiians have they surf for Hawaii, and the Americans surf for USA.
Oh, I never really thought about that. That's got to get confusing. They're going to have to really clean up put their house in order, as they say, if they're going to go on the world stage like that.
They already have. Yeah, they've done it. So one of the Hawaiians is on the team, and I think the rest are from the mainland for Tokyo, because it's going to happen next year now. I think.
That is so cool. I really hope it works out. So what's your favorite aspect of what you do now from a day-to-day life situation, given everything you've been through? What's your favorite part of life now?
I would say it's probably being at these competitions, being on the beach with all of my friends from all over the world. The BBC just did this thing on their news website, which was they had the audiences send in the last normal photograph before COVID. And I seen it and I was like, I wonder what my last normal photograph was. And I looked at it and it was me it was on the 14th of March in La Jolla, celebrating my birthday with all of my friends from all over the world. And they're all there because of this sport.
That is
so it was all my friends from Japan, all my friends from Australia, Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Peru, all the Europeans, the French, the Italians, and we're just having this great night, and we're all brought together because of parasurfing.
So it's that community. You really, basically, you got very lucky. You were kind of partly in the community, but then when you needed it most, they were there for you.
Yeah, and they still are. And that's what I'm missing the most right now with the whole, COVID quarantine. But it's starting to open up again. So yeah. There's light at the end of the tunnel.
There's light at the end of the tunnel. And if you had to look back and think about everything you've been through, could you say that you now look at life differently than before the accident? Are you more appreciative of things that maybe you didn't really appreciate before?
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. I'd say the one thing that I've gained much more is patience. And not just with because everything takes me a lot longer. It's patience with other people. One of the most discussed things in our community is the able-bodied approach to their behavior around disabled people. So the classic example is, the parking spaces. That has always been a big issue of people who don't need them, use them. And for people in wheelchairs especially, they're essential to get to go and do your daily routines. And if they're not available, because someone's parked there because they're only going to be a minute, you roll up and you don't know if that person's going to, take off quickly, or they're going to just park there. So you've got to find an alternative, which adds more time to your daily routine. And as I said earlier, time is the thing that's taken away from you the most. And so when I see that now, sometimes I'll park and right next to me, someone will literally run out of the store, jump in their car and drive off. No blue badge or any of that. And I used to really get annoyed with that, but I don't anymore. And I've just learned that it's not my job, first of all, to police this. And it's not my job to educate these people. And people have all different reasons for behaving the way that they do. So I just accept it. I just accept that that's just the way people are. That's how we are as humans. And yeah. So it doesn't faze me anymore. It's not worth getting annoyed over. And it's not just that, that trickles off into all kinds of, behavioral issues.
So you're a lot more accepting of humans as a creature, and just say, you know what, okay, where before maybe you would have been more, you easily would have gotten a little bit more annoyed at them, and maybe yeah, I'd
have been affected, I'd have been aggravated, and maybe approached them or confronted them. Whereas I don't now. It's just it's not worth it, and I don't need that bad energy dragging around with me all day. So I'm accepting all of the flaws that we have and embracing them.
That is very interesting. So is there this sort of animosity between the ParaSurfers and the regular surfers for kind of what you're talking about here?
No, not generally. There's always localism. Sometimes you'll show up to a break, and especially when there's a group of adaptive surfers, because depending on how much help you need will determine how many people are on the beach. And when it looks like a crowd, then the people who are the locals, they get kind of hostile towards that. They see it as an intrusion. So once they've figured it out, normally they're all cool with it. But occasionally you'll get a bit of grief in the water.
That's too bad. It's tough to, because everyone Everyone puts themselves naturally at first above, and then once they realize what's going on, then they, like you said, they're a little more accepting, generally speaking. But yeah, that first kind of instance can definitely get tough, I bet.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any lessons that you have learned that over the last 15 years that you could have tell our audience, or for our younger audience, or even for our older audience, that are just flabbergasted by the whole concept of what's happened? Is there any advice you have for them if if anything serious happens to them, that they should at least keep their head up or something?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like, your life isn't over, it's just altered. If you find yourself in a recovering from a trauma of any kind, then there's a massive support network out there that you can tap into. There is there's a multitude of people who've already forged the way for every aspect of disability or even mental issues, just of ways to cope, ways to live a really full and impactful life. So the resources are out there. You've just got to find them, and it's really not that bad.
That is interesting. So not that bad. So as long as you place yourself into a community of like-minded individuals, even though your body can't move as well, it's kind of like having almost, I guess, like a permanent broken leg or something. There's still things you can do. Our coaches would say, well, you hurt yourself doesn't mean you can't get in the gym and do flexibility or do this or do something else. So as long as you quickly substitute, your regular day-to-day with another community, it's really not that bad. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, there's that. The other element, one of the things that I've learned over time, is when you have a traumatic incident in your life, it doesn't just happen to you. It happens to your entire family and your entire social network. So all of your friends, your siblings, everybody gets affected. It's not just you. And if you know that going in, then you'll be able to cope with what's going on with yourself a lot better, and appreciate the people around you, because it's they're experiencing it as well.
That's a very interesting point. Yeah, because no one really thinks about it. But, mom and dad now have to change their regular day-to-day. They got to potentially buy a new kind of van that has a new lift so that the chair can get in for distance drives. They got to change bags and this, that, and the other. And it's a full team, like you said, with the surfers, and it's a family team. So, that's an interesting point for all those young, crazy kids out there that, put themselves, again, above everyone else. So it won't happen to me. But in reality, it's going to take a team to get you back together. And you got to show that appreciation.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is amazing. Well, Spike, man, you have an amazing story. And the fact that you're so humble and like not depressed about it, and you're happy and you're living life and you're top 5 in the world at a new sport, just, overnight life changes. And you just said, no, next. That's an amazing way to live life. And I wish there's more people out there like you that could really, take a bad moment, but see the positive in it.
Oh, there's millions of people out there way better than me. And I'm glad to call them my friends.
Yeah, it's really cool. It sounds like an amazing community to be part of. And I wish you the best of luck with everything. And thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your story with us.
You're welcome.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed and learned a few things. There's a big world out there worth exploring, and I'm happy to be able to bring these great experiences right to you through this podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast and learned something, please share and take a screen grab of our funky cartoons and hashtag GRT certified for a chance to win a shout out to our community. Also, please leave us a review to be part of helping this information get out into the industry. It's much appreciated. Along with these podcasts, we have a large online content hub that we call the GRT Network, with many other interviews and full tutorials and written content discussing everything about acrobatics. We will be constantly growing this archive of videos like a cross between Netflix and Wikipedia for anyone in the acrobatic industry. We also have a complete online educational program for athletes of all levels that provides a do-it-yourself pathway to success for any acrobat. Check out our constantly growing library of playlists that will teach you anything from tightening up your social media, to how to get around fear, to even learning all the biology that underlies all your acrobatic skills. We work very hard with our team around the world to provide this exclusive content for you and appreciate any donations made to the FTA to help keep these episodes coming at you. And if you want all the content, become a GRT Network full member to get exclusive content before everyone else and access to special discounts and giveaways through our amazing global partners. Thanks guys, see you next episode.